you've made it no secret that you think the offseason was less than ideal. I pulled this quote from your most recent piece where I actually wanted to just read it in full because it expresses a sentiment that I think a lot of fans are can identify with. Right now, we're seemingly sitting to see what happens with an aging Russell Westbrook. They haven't signed anybody but Dario Šarić. This is before they had made the Russ signing official. And in the arms race that is the Western Conference, they are lollygagging. They're not on track to be the headliners like the Spurs dynasty was, but instead a single footnote in an era that was waiting to be claimed by a team. Um, the reason I like this quote is that the sentiment that you're kind of expressing here about Jokic being this all-time great and fans, like I said, including myself, can identify with it, to some degree, regardless of how we feel within some reasonable range about this offseason. Fans are upset because they perceive that wasting his prime is this grave injustice, right? I wanted to know, since you've written that piece, do you still feel basically that strong about how the Nuggets offseason has gone, especially in the context of now that the Russ deal is done? Just give us your brief overall assessment before we jump into the individual moves.
Yeah, I would say I still feel about as strong. Not as emotionally oh, this is whatever. That was written during in between the Saric and the Russ signing, where it was oh, this is really grim. And I still think it's really grim, but I've come to terms, just I've had I've had time to just be yeah, it is what it is. But I do think
Actually, Asher, could you comment on what you think the minimum responsibility of a GM of this team? Because I mean, Calvin Booth talked about his responsibility as the steward of Nikola Jokic's prime. What do you think is the minimum responsibility of a GM with this roster with Nikola Jokic on it right now?
put a good supporting cast around him. If you put a good supporting cast around Jokic, you will at least be competing for a title, and they're still competing for a title. I know a lot of people have overreacted and been oh, they're out of the title race. No, they're not. They have Jokic, they have Jamal, they have MPJ, they have Gordon. That's great. But when your fifth starter is Christian Braun, who Christian is a good player, but your biggest issue was arguably your three-point shooting, and was your ball handling, and was point of attack defense at some points. And you let a top 10 perimeter defender in the league go, and a top 15 shooter go, and someone who was very willing to take that fifth starter role and not take a ton of shots and would compete all the time, had a good motor, has been a piece of two separate championship teams, and you just let him go because you wanted to develop young guys. That's not how title contention has ever worked in the league. And I get wanting to revolutionize stuff, but at a certain point, there's a reason that things are the way they are some of the time. And I don't think you should be relying on second and third year guys as significant pieces of your rotation to compete. It's one thing if, you take a rookie and they turn out to be really good, and then you can play them. If it's one or two rookies, cool, man. If it's one or two young guys, cool. Yeah, if they hit, and they're good players. I have no problem with Christian playing a good chunk of minutes on a championship team. He's shown that he can do that. But Peyton, as high as I am on him long term, he couldn't really play in the playoffs in the Timberwolves series because he just didn't have any offensive juice. And Julian Strawther, I mean, he might be a good shooter, but he shot 29% from three last year. And also, he's not really a good defender. He's very skinny. He can get pushed off his spots easy. Who knows if he can play in the playoffs? And then you look at Jalen Pickett and Hunter Tyson. They don't have any NBA skills, really. Hunter Tyson might be a good level NBA shooter, but we're past the Joe Harrises of the world. We're past the point where you can play guys who are only shooters. And he's not 6'8", they list him at. He's probably closer to 6'5", 6'6". We've seen the pictures of him standing next to Christian. He looks shorter than Christian, some of them.
Or is Christian taller than we think?
I don't. Yeah. It's either way, he's just not an NBA level rotation player, especially for a contender. If it was the Charlotte Hornets, that's one thing. Maybe he could get some minutes for the Hornets. But when you're talking about trying to compete for a title, trying to trying to do the best with the prime of, in my opinion, the best player of this generation. someone who might go down as a top 10 player of all time, who is the best passer we've seen since LeBron or Magic Johnson. Like you could say so many things about Jokic that have already been said. I don't need to go on.
Too many things.
Like when you have that level of talent on your roster, I think it's just you got to do everything you can to surround him with good players. And right now, there's a lot of unproven guys on this roster. And then the veterans they do have, like, they traded 3 second-round picks to get off Reggie Jackson. You know what you could have done if you didn't want to give Reggie Jackson a 2-year contract? Don't give him a fucking 2-year contract. Like, it's really simple to just be like, hey, you weren't that good. So, like, it was a handshake deal when he agreed to the buyout. Hey, we're going to give you this contract. Which, like, sure, man, I get. But also, he didn't play really at all once you signed him. And you're going to give him the taxpayer mid-level exception for a 1+1? Like, that was probably to maintain agent relationships and all that stuff. I get that. But you shouldn't be salary dumping Reggie Jackson on a 1-year, $5 million deal. You shouldn't really be taking all these roster spots up with guys who don't matter in the grand scheme of things. You should be trying to get, like, if you're going to draft young guys with upside. Draft guys who are going to contribute. Draft guys who aren't these late 20s round, like, age-wise. Pick guys who will actually fucking play. Like, Day'Ron, I liked the pick of, and it's unfortunate that he tore his Achilles. But I'm not going to dog Booth for that because, like, I was really high on Day'Ron. That's a good pick. If he was healthy, he could have contributed, and you can't possibly see that coming. Like, I'm not going to blame Booth for that pick. I think that was one of the moves that I liked from this offseason. One of the very
it was like the one, like,
yeah, it was like
part of the offseason was on draft night.
Yeah, it was like, hey, man, we got our guy at least. And I think there was too much confidence coming off of the 2023 draft. I think hitting on Christian, hitting on Peyton made Booth feel like, oh, I'm just good at this shit. So he was like, you know, I'll draft whoever. And I think he got a little just too confident in that and too confident in the 2 timelines thing, because we've seen a lot of teams try the 2 timelines thing. Name one time it's fucking worked.
I don't think we've seen a lot of teams try, but we've seen a few and it hasn't worked out. We're going to talk about that when we get to talking about the young players. But I just wanted to comment on what you said earlier about that, you know, just put a good supporting cast around Jokic. That's the responsibility. You know, Will, you and I had this conversation about what is the responsibility of a GM, right? And I think, you know, you can comment on this if you disagree or if you agree. But I think we kind of came to the conclusion that if you have a roster around Jokic that should conceivably make a Western Conference Finals, and I think we both acknowledge that the West is a tougher conference than the East, then the GM has done their job. And to be clear, I actually think we had that last year. We had, you know, some bad injury luck. There were other, like, holes with the like problems with the roster, but that was a team that I think should have made the Western Conference Finals. They didn't. This year is more TBD, I think, because they've leaned a bit more into needing some of these guys who are question marks to turn into known quantities. Let's talk about one of the previously known quantities on this team, which is Kentavious Caldwell-Pope, KCP. He went to the Orlando Magic for a 3-year, $66 million deal. The Nuggets did not try to keep him for anywhere near that number. So Josh Kroenke actually commented on this move as well in that piece from Bennett Durando. Said, once we knew that Caldwell Pope was going to opt out and test the open market, we thought it would probably be pretty difficult to retain him. And when he was asked about what the determining factor was about what number to go to during KCP's free agency, like, we were speculating about this throughout the entire summer. And so when the actual number came out as this $22 million a year was it's like, oh, okay. I thought that it would be way higher. That would be the thing that keeps, the team from re-signing him, because they had previously indicated during their end of season press conference that, signing him, at a reasonable number. So we understand that they could have been priced out reasonably, but I don't think that $22 million is it. But they said we had some pretty good offers in that we thought made sense for us going forward. But when you hit the open market and there are teams that have space and there are teams that really need a certain skill set, it's difficult. We've been smart in how we planned, and we think we have young players who can fill certain roles. Clearly referring to Christian Brown, they've made multiple references to him as probably being that fifth starter, although everyone around the team since then has kind of been distancing themselves from the idea that Christian is guaranteed that starting spot. But it does sound like as soon as they knew that KCP was going to opt out and not take his player option, that was the number that was going to be too high, which was around between 17 and $18 million.
Obviously, Christian fills some of that defensive role. His offense is a huge question. So, like with the Wolves, I think there was a sentiment that maybe Christian played Ant better than KCP. He was more physical or more strong, whereas KCP is more like playing defense with, his mind and his ability to navigate screens and like just anticipate what's coming as he's experienced. Now we just have one less player who can do that. Like you had maybe more advantage having KCP and having situationally bringing in a P-Watt or a Christian Brown. What were your kind of thoughts about the Wolves series, and how do you anticipate the Nuggets perimeter defense like going into this season in the playoffs?
Yeah, so my thing about the Wolves series is I do think Christian played Ant better than KCP. But also, the thing that made the Nuggets good defensively is that you could throw different options at an Ant.
Mm-hmm.
If you needed someone more physical, you could throw out a Christian. But if you needed someone to guard, like you say, a Stephen Curry, who's running around screens, Christian isn't great at screen navigation. He's not like awful at it, but he's not great at it either. KCP is a top 3 probably screen navigator in the league. So if you're going against someone
Easily.
like that, you don't have an option for that really anymore. You have one guy now. So in 2 years, we've gone from the title team, which had Christian, Bruce, and KCP, to now our second best perimeter defender probably being Aaron Gordon. And we've seen that not be a formula for success before. Because take the Sun series from 2022 and the Sun series from 2023. Compare and contrast the defense in those series, and you'll quickly realize, oh, shit. The determining factor is that they had multiple options to throw at Devin Booker. If KCP wasn't working, they could throw Bruce at him. If neither of them were working,
they could guard pick and roll. Like, yeah, that was kind of it.
And the whole thing with Jokić is that he is a good defender in some contexts, but you need to put that good context around him. And for that context to exist, you need good point of attack defenders. And they have one like guaranteed good point of attack defender, maybe P-Watt, but he's more of a weak side protector in my mind. Maybe Aaron, but he's more of a weak side protector in my mind. Like those guys are people who are used better on big forwards or in helping roles, free safetying, that sort of thing. As far as guards go, you only have one good defender now because Jamal Murray is not a good defender anymore. He used to be, but ever since the ACL thing, just hasn't really been that. You have Russ, who is like, can be good on defense, but most of his looking like a good defender just comes from him hustling a lot. And I don't think he's actually like a great defender. Then you have Julian Strawther, who is, as I touched on earlier, gets bumped off his spots a lot, can get caught ball watching. He's not really a good defender. You have Christian. That's it. And it significantly hamstrings their defensive versatility. It significantly hamstrings, I think, the defensive floor of the team and also the defensive ceiling of the team. It's a move that doesn't make any fucking sense to me because the thing about it is like, yeah, man, you would have been locked in the roster. But guess what? That roster won a fucking title. You won the title with KCP as your starting two guard, not with Christian. Christian is not as good as KCP on either end of the floor. And like he can replicate some of the stuff KCP does defensively, and he's a very high level defender. He's not as good as KCP on defense. And I get that giving a 31-year-old, I think it was, like
30.
30-year-old a long contract. Okay, sure, that's a little, but like
long
KCP,
contract. Oh, long contract.
But KCP isn't really that old, and also his game should age well.
He was also
like,
clearly sought after, which is why it was so difficult to retain him this
yeah,
offseason.
and
Asher, I
Theoretically.
want to challenge you on something here
sure.
because we talked about the Wolves series and how to your mind Christian played Ant better, and there is clearly an argument for having as much defensive versatility as possible,
hmm
but I think that even the most staunch defenders of Malone might agree that he might have stuck with KCP for too long in the Wolves series in terms of being the primary matchup on Ant.
Yeah.
Now, what I want to ask you is, would it be reasonable for Calvin to assume that there'd be detrimentally fewer minutes in high leverage opportunities for Christian? And we're talking about Peyton and his defensive impact as well,
hmm
and potentially, Julian, who didn't play in the playoffs in the main rotation. Had he kept KCP, particularly at a higher number than even what his player option was, which is what he ended up getting, around $22 million a year.
In Calvin's mind, I think that makes complete sense for that to exist in Calvin's mind. But in my mind, which I don't think I know more than Calvin or anything, but having them play a ton of minutes in high leverage situations could be detrimental to the team rather than vice versa. Because Christian, spacing Christian is not good. We saw that. The spacing with Peyton, not good. And then the defense with Julian Strawther, can assume probably not great. There's a reason KCP was playing a lot, and it's because he's very reliable. And like, while he didn't have a great series, he's been on multiple title teams. He's one of the best role players in the league, and there's a reason that he got that money. Like, do you think, like, real quick, who's better, him or DeAndre Hunter?
Who, KCP or DeAndre
Yeah.
Hunter?
Yeah, KCP or
KCP.
DeAndre Hunter.
I'm taking
Yeah,
KCP.
DeAndre Hunter's making more than him. Clint Capella or KCP. Like, KCP is making less than
Well,
Clint Capella.
DeAndre Hunter just got his his rookie scale extension, so.
Yeah, but like, you could go through a lot of these guys, and they're very clearly worse than KCP and making more than KCP. You can afford to pay that. I think it's just the owners sort of being cheap about it, because I think Calvin does genuinely believe all the stuff he says, but also it gives the owners a really good excuse to be like, actually, we don't want to pay it all that. We've already won our title.
I completely think that the new CBA was like,
yeah.
We've talked about like which classes of players may have won from this CBA and which may have lost, but I do think that like the biggest winners of the new CBA are cheap owners, because now they have all the excuses in the world to not spend money. Okay, so let's talk about the non, purely financial, let's say, tangible benefits, or at least a perk of letting KCP walk. We're under the second apron. The Nuggets get the taxpayer MLE. They're able to sign Dario Šarić with that taxpayer MLE on a 1+1 deal.
Mm-hmm.
It is what it is. That's the Denver tax, right? Dario was actually 9th in minutes for the Golden State Warriors last year. He played 64 games. Zeke Naji was 11th in minutes for the Nuggets last season, and he only played 58 games. My question to you is, despite both of these guys being, 9th men plus on their teams, not even playing 70 games as they're effectively backup fives on those teams, what are the chances that Zeke Naji is actually able to benefit from Dario's presence in that backup five in terms of total minutes played, just because he might be the best backup four option next to Dario? Last year we were playing like Peyton at the four effectively, and Dario's even smaller than Zeke, so I don't think that that's necessarily a great a super viable option long term in a regular season, just because of that front court size necessity, especially with Duran out this season with injury.
I don't think Zeke is ever gonna be a good player. So like, could he benefit from Dario? Yeah, because Dario is a good shooter and he would provide spacing and all that stuff. But like, in my mind,
he would also let Zeke play his, quote unquote natural position. We've heard a lot over the last couple of years about how Zeke might look better if he was playing the four. What are your thoughts on that?
I mean, yeah, he's probably more of a 4 than a 5, but like, his shot doesn't exist anymore. So a lot of the things of, he could be a stretch 4 and like a switch big, has kind of gone down, as sort of not anything notable, because he changed his shot form and now he's shooting like 30% from 3 on low volume. where beforehand he was shooting like 45. I don't know why you change your shot form when you're shooting 45% from three, but
Let
that was a
guys
decision
shoot their weird shots.
Yeah, that was a decision that him and the organization made. That wasn't like a solely him decision, but like that was a decision that was made, and he's clearly suffered from it because now most of his role is to roll to the basket, where he doesn't have good hands and can't catch a ball half the time. And on defense, it's be this switch big. Yeah, he's fine on defense. I don't think he's a huge negative on defense, but when you're just not great at any one skill, or not even particularly good at any one skill, it's hard to justify playing you on an NBA court, especially for someone of the level of the Nuggets. Or like, if you were to stagger MPJ with the second unit, I think that looks better than Zeke. If you were to stagger AG with the second unit, I think that looks better than Zeke. And I think a lot of free agents would have looked better than Zeke. I just don't think a backup front court of Zeke, Šarić works, because I assume Peyton will be the backup three, and the spacing of a Zeke, Peyton, Watson lineup will not be good.
Well, we had that last year.
Yeah, and it wasn't good.
All right, touche.
And if Zeke just simply paid off in the way that they were hoping, would that have meant we could have kept KCP? Because I feel like the Dario Šarić is a necessity. We had to sign some kind of front court depth. That also led to our ability to sign Russell Westbrook. Many people are trying to clarify that the Russell Westbrook signing was not a KCP replacement, but more of a Bruce Brown replacement, where we're trying to get a transition scorer, a ball handler, someone who can pass, maybe play some hustle defense. Obviously, I don't think Russ is going to be the same defensive player as Bruce, obviously, but you can get something out of him there.
Yeah.
And Josh Kroenke was also asked about Russ, and he said, I got a chance to meet him for the first time right after he signed, and as I said to him, I'm very grateful that he's on this side. I've watched him tear our hearts out for so many years in Oklahoma City. Obviously, he was referring to that buzzer beater that he hit in Denver. So he'll be a really good person for us to have on and off the court with some of the young guys who are expecting to take bigger roles this year. Russ has seen it all in and around the NBA, so he's going to be a big part of who we are, both in the locker room and on the court. Yeah, Asher, how are you feeling about the Russ signing so far in the mix of all this offseason noise?
It's a really weird signing for me to try and rank. I think it's the move this offseason with the highest boom or highest bust potential to me. I don't have any questions about the off-court stuff. Like, Russ is a great teammate from everything I've heard. Like, players love him, coaches love him. Like, he's genuinely a great teammate from what I've heard. And I don't think you can have enough great teammates in a locker room. And he wants to win. That's not in question. He's going to do everything he can to make that happen. And I do see him more as a Bruce Brown replacement than a KCP replacement, as you mentioned. And I think he'll help the transition scoring a ton, because if you guys had to try and guess, where do you think the transition offense ranked league-wide last season for the Nuggets?
30th.
They were dead last.
Yeah.
They
were dead last for most of the season, and then pulled into 29th in that like post All-Star.
And then they dropped back.
And they were like top 5 post All-Star when they were going on that big run.
Yep.
But
and then towards the end they dropped back down. They ended up being tied with the Hornets for transition offense, which a LaMelo ball-less Charlotte Hornets for the most of the season, may I point out. So it's that should help having Russ because he's still at 36 years old somehow a freak athlete, like still one of the fastest players in the league, still someone who can jump out of the gym. And he will push the rock. If there's one thing that Russell Westbrook will for sure do, it is take that and run. And I think that'll fit well next to Jokić. I think we'll see a lot of touchdown passes from Jokić to Russ. But a lot of questions come in the half-court sets, because how does he look as a off-ball player? Because if he's playing with Jokić most of the time, probably won't have the ball in his hands. Does he play the Aaron Gordon role in the half court? Does he, do 2-man game stuff with Yoke? Is he someone who will primarily have the ball in his hands. I'm interested to see what Malone does with him, because I do think there's ways to make him work, but I think there's also ways that it will look disastrous. I really think that he has a super high ceiling and a super low floor relative to expectation. I'm not saying he's going to be an all NBA or all-star player, but like he might be like a sixth starter level guy. You know, he also might tank a lot of lineups he's in. It's completely possible that it goes either way.
Right. Another veteran that we have to make a decision on is Jamal Murray, who was back in the building. He was seen in the gym, practicing with Peyton. So Nuggets fans were happy to see that, since there's so much talk about his conditioning and his health and his level of play. To finish,
Nice to see Jamal smiling.
Yeah, he was smiling.
As a Jamal fan myself.
For sure. We had the contracts like with Reggie or Zeke, where the front office is maybe trying to show, hey, like we take care of our guys, like we believe in our dudes. Jamal was one of those players who some were arguing maybe got a max too early, or there were questions about whether he would live up to it. And then of course he did, and we won a championship, and he had an amazing playoffs. So it was kind of like almost like a Josh Kroenke trend that I was wondering if Calvin Booth was trying to show or demonstrate that he was doing that too with other players, where maybe he should have been more cautious. I don't know what's going on right now with Jamal's.
With Zeke?
Yeah, I don't know what's going on with Jamal's contract right now, if there's negotiating, if there's something him and his agent aren't happy with, or there's things that the Nuggets are worried about with protecting themselves. But it is kind of funny that we were kind of giving out these contracts like free candy to Hunter Tyson and gang. And are we maybe being too nitpicky with Jamal?
He should get it. Like, in my mind, you got to extend him. You got to extend Aaron Gordon. If you don't do that, you might as well kiss the window entirely goodbye. Like, the KCP thing was a big blow to it, but I think they still will compete for a title this season. If you lose either of those guys, goodbye. You are not going to be able to replace either of them with the tools that you have. Because guess what? You're going to be in the second apron. You did all this to avoid the second apron. It's inevitable. If you want to compete with the current salary and all that stuff, you're going to end up in the second apron.
Yeah,
you're not going to be able to replace those guys. And both of them have matched chemistry with Jokić. Like, the only people that match the chemistry with Jokić that you can assume across the league are each other and maybe MPJ. And obviously guys look great next to Jokić, and whoever they would bring in as replacements would probably look good next to Jokić, but you're not going to get players of the same level. And it would be a terrible look to let them walk. Because if Aaron Gordon hits free agency, he probably gets a shit ton of money from someone else. And are the Nuggets going to pay that? But history says no at this point. If Jamal Murray hits free agency, if the Pistons have a shit ton of cap, why not throw it at Jamal Murray? Free agents aren't great these days. People don't typically hit free agency.
Yeah.
Paul George, 35-year-old Paul George is the best free agent we've had probably this decade potentially. It's very rare that guys hit free agency now. And so when they do and teams have salary cap, even the best ones are going to get a ton of money. Fred VanVleet got $40 million. Jamal Murray can definitely get more than $40 million from a team in free agency. Will it be a max? I don't know.
That's a really good point about Fred VanVleet, because of the new salary floor, right? That's the other dimension of this new CBA, is that it's harder for some teams to spend money, but they also are forcing other teams to spend a certain amount of money. And so you're, taking a risk when you, let somebody get to free agency, unrestricted free agency anyway.
Yeah. And it's just look, Jamal Murray has earned that from Denver. I know he wasn't great in the playoff run, but this was probably when he played the best regular season of his career. He played very well when he was healthy.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And I know that there are questions about his health, but outside of this season, he hasn't really struggled with health besides the torn ACL. And even if he plays only 60 games, guess what? He's probably playing a better 60 games than anyone else you're going to replace him with. Are all-star level guards better than Jamal? Probably, but also are they going to come to Denver? No, you don't have the assets to get them.
Yeah.
And you're not going to find a better one in free agency in all likelihood. Is Jamal worth more to Denver than he would be to other teams? Absolutely. Does he get a max from other teams? Maybe not. But does Denver need to give him that? Yes. You're not going to find better than Jamal Murray. And like the Olympics looked rough. Yeah. The playoffs, rough. Yeah. Is this probably a trend going forward? I don't know. But do you need to take that shot of paying him a max? Yes, because you're not going to find a better second option in free agency. And you're not going to be able to replace him because guess what? Calvin Booth has emptied the war chest. You don't have assets. Your most tradable contract is Zeke Naji, and you probably have to attach a pick to get off of him. So you look at tradable. That. Yeah, like as far as in terms of matching salaries. And like Aaron Gordon is incredibly important to this team. If they let him walk, you're not going to replace Aaron Gordon.
We didn't get to comment on this during our Olympic show, but I was like texting Will during the Olympics that like, man, if Team Serbia had Aaron Gordon, someone who could catch a lob, like he's such a perfect 4 next to Jokić because of that, not just the lob catching, but how he just knows like where to be on the floor and all of this, like the chemistry between those guys is, it has such a high, it raises the ceiling in the team in such subtle ways. Like I think that it would be a mistake to let him go as well. Over half of you are not subscribed. So if you like our content, please remember to subscribe, like, share, hit the notification bell, leave us a review. We're on Spotify, Apple Music, Amazon Music. We're on all the sites. Get us in your RSS feed. Follow us on Instagram at What's in a Game NBA. And also check out our clip channel for those quick bites of us doing blooper-ish style things. Sometimes it's just me giggling at things that Will says.
If you have any problems with anything we said during this episode, DM Will on Twitter. Take it up with him.
Yeah, I will gladly take it.
If you want to at me, just at Will.
Yes. Yeah. Yes. And I may or may not be kind in response.
And always remember that winning is fun and losing sucks.